Hey everybody, State Representative Ken Clark here, District 24. I wanted to bring a couple special guests today because I want to talk about a report that these two gentlemen just completed covering administrative costs in charter schools by comparison to public schools. Now, before we have this conversation, I want to point out I've got some great charter schools in my district. Arizona School for the Arts, Metro Arts, all these things are great charter schools, but there have been concerns for many years about the oversight in terms of what happens to our taxpayer dollars in these charter schools. So we've got with me today David Wells and Jim Hall, and we're going to go straight to the report. So first, why don't you guys tell me a little bit about the organizations you're with?
I'm Dave Wells. I'm the research director for the Grand Canyon Institute, and it's a centrist think tank that focuses on fiscal policy and was founded by people like George Cunningham, Carolyn Allen, and Susan Gerard in 2011.
Okay.
And I'm Jim Hall. I founded Arizonans for Charter School Accountability 2 years ago, retired principal, and I do research into the finances of charter schools and file complaints and actions against charter schools that have done things inappropriately. And I also believe there's lots and lots of good charter schools too.
So let's take the top line first. So the top line of the report was that the average public school spends about $680 a year on administrative costs. The average charter school spends about $1,400. But what they get in total is different as well, right? How much do public schools get in total per pupil?
Jim, you got that down.
Well, according to, we're 49th in the nation, and according to that data, the census data, we spend $7,200 per pupil. The M&O expenses, what we examined, the maintenance and operation expenses, charter schools spend about $6,800 and public schools spend about $5,700. And that's because charter schools get what's called charter add-on money, $1,700 per pupil for elementary and over $2,000 per pupil for high school. So charters get a little bit more because they're unable to pass bonds to build facilities, and they aren't able to buy capital goods like public schools can.
So basically, going back to the average, the $680 per pupil, $1,400 per pupil for charter versus public, there were some charters that had zero admin. I remember seeing there was a Montessori school that had zero, but then there were some that had even higher than $1,400. Which were the ones that were the most egregious in this scenario?
Well, let's start with zero. There's charter schools where the people that run them are the teachers, and they don't charge administrative costs. They run the school and they pay themselves a teacher's salary. So that's where that comes from. We found that the vast majority of schools that have very, very high administrative costs are the large charters, oddly enough. It's not the small charters, it's the large charters. Basically 6 of them that are nationally known.
And what are the names of those?
Basis Inc., Basis Ed, I'm sorry, Imagine, Ed Key, Leona, and
I know the online one was PPC Inc., but they weren't as bad with the ratio, but they had
and Archway, I'm sorry.
And Archway, yeah.
Archway, which is Great Hearts.
But I think the big thing is that under economic principles, when you have a lot of schools, like Basis has 9,000, or a lot of students, they have 9,000 students, so their per student cost for administration ought to be less. A lot of their schools are relatively large in size, pretty comparable to district schools, and yet their administration costs, especially general administration, is through the roof. As we discovered, is for general administration, they spend 30 times more per pupil than the 6 largest public school districts do, which is just absolutely amazing.
Couldn't you say that the public schools have much higher numbers than 9,000, and they're the ones who are seeing the economies of scale? Wouldn't that?
No, in the report, we actually looked at public school districts that are the same size. We looked at public school districts that are between 5,000 and 6,000, 6 and 7, 7 and 8, and so on. And generally speaking, those small districts, an example, Fowler Elementary District is about 7,000. Casa Grande Elementary is about 7,000. And their administrative costs are between $650 and $750 per student. The average charter school is $1,400. basis we're talking about just now, they average $2,200 per pupil in their schools, same size. So we have districts that are 7,000 students and it costs $700 per pupil, and we have basis that has 8,000 students and somehow they're spending $2,200. They actually spend over $1.5 million per school in administrative costs.
If you take a look at statewide, if charter schools used the same average for admin costs as public schools, we would be saving $128 million a year, is that right?
Correct.
Can you talk a little bit about the difference in oversight, procurement rules and whatnot between public schools and charter schools?
Sure. Charter schools are able to opt out of procurement requirements, so they don't have to get bids for major purchases like public school districts would. They also can opt out of the USFR, was a Unified Financial Records, Unified System of Financial Records. And they can opt out of that too, which is all the guidelines we have for accounting principles. So charter schools basically don't turn in any information except attendance information so they can get paid. And they turn in a budget every year and they turn in an annual financial report. And public districts have to have bidding requirements, of course, and they send in documents on everything from the number of teachers, the ethnicity of teachers, detailed breakdowns of demographics, lots and lots of information that charter schools don't have to comply with.
But that's why, that's the attraction that people have to charter schools, isn't it? That they have more freedom. What's wrong with that?
Well, I agree, and the reason we have charter schools is to free them of all those restraints in curriculum, so they can have freedom to look at different curriculum, and supposedly freedom from all the requirements of reporting, so they can put more money into the classroom. And that was the intent of the law. But unfortunately, the larger charters actually spend far more on administrative costs than public districts, even though they don't have all the reporting requirements.
And our findings not too dissimilar from, or actually very similar to findings in Michigan, which also funds their charter schools about the same as their public school districts. And they found when they did a more sophisticated regression analysis that just simply being a charter, when you control for size and everything else, raised the per pupil administration cost by about $724. And when they did another one where they controlled for the types of charters, they found that just like we did, that the large charter chains themselves, just making that the only thing that was different from another charter school, raised their administration costs by about $400 per student.
Dan, tell me about what it took to do this study. How many charter schools are there total in Arizona?
Well, we actually looked at 410 charter holders, and there's a difference between charter holders and charter schools. And then we looked at 210 school districts. And so what we did, we went through the annual financial report, opened up each file individually, and then Dave created a spreadsheet that was a template, and we then cut all the actual expenditures for every charter school and all the actual expenditures for every district and put them in a spreadsheet. That's not available anywhere in the state. So for the first time ever, we have a spreadsheet that has all of the expenditures for 2014-15 for every charter school and for every district. And from that, we can then rank schools, we can then manipulate that data, and that's how we were able to come up with these things. The charter schools the data they turn in isn't looked at by anyone. The Auditor General doesn't look at charter schools at all, and the State Board for Charter Schools doesn't examine this data either. The charter schools turn it in every year, but no one really reads it. So we were able to collect all this data, and then we put together this report, which is the first time we've really looked at in depth at every charter school and every district.
That sounds like a Herculean effort.
Jim's the guy who did the hard part of it, but I did the template. He did all the downloading.
It's 22 mouse clicks per school. So each one you have to click the mouse 22 times in order to find the report, and then what's that?
It's okay.
Oh, it takes 22 clicks to find the report and cut all the data for each school, and so it took 100 hours.
So that's why we're calling for the reports to go through the Auditor General's office and have the Charter Board actually look at them.
Sounds reasonable. So thank you very much for giving us this time. And if you have questions about this, send them in, If you have concerns, if you think it's all wrong, let us know, because we want to know for sure. We want to dig into this. That's been part of the problem, that folks have not been able to dig into this. So thank you for watching this special presentation. Stay tuned at azhousedemocrats.com, and we'll have more information on everything having to do with education. Thanks, gentlemen. Thanks,
you.
y'all. Bye.